Thanks for listening to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines a shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. I can almost hear you right now. What? Another cult episode? This one, though, came to me via my eldest partner, Josh. Thanks for sending me the video that spurred on this episode. And I wanted to shout out a listener, Grace. I got to catch up with her in person last week. I hope you have a fantastic junior year. You are wonderful, Grace. Back to the episode, though. If you watch the Netflix series Dancing for the Devil, the 7M Tik Tok Cult, then you'll be interested to learn they weren't the first dance cult. Not even close. Let's get into it. First, what is a cult? From a book titled The Cult Files, authors Leo Moynihan and Sam Pilger say the word cult stems from the Latin cultus, meaning care, cultivation, and worship. And the authors remind us, quote, cults don't have to mean danger, abuse, and death. Many have offered simpler, more innocent incentives, end quote. And they give us an example. The Prince Philip's movement in the South Pacific. They worshipped the UK's Duke of Edinburgh as an innocuous cult. Today's conversation, though, centers around a cult that began just a few years after the tragedy at Tiananmen Square. I watched an excellent 2-part YouTube video on the roots of this cult and where they are now, and I highly recommend it to you. And also give Spectacles on YouTube a subscribe, would ya? In the first video, he explains it was early in the morning on April 25th, 1998 in China. A crowd had gathered in Beihai Park and then marched to a central government complex, Zonanhai. This group had no banners, no megaphones. Still, though, the government saw it as a protest. It was the first ever held at Zonanhai, and the government officials were deeply aware of the ramifications the gathering could have and a strong reaction after Tiananmen Square. What it could mean. The government decided to negotiate with the group. The group's practitioners made their demands clear. They were practitioners of a type of Qigong, which is a slow movement exercise called Falun Gong. They demanded that the government declare them as not an enemy, that no action would be taken against them during and after this demonstration, and that the government would release fellow Falun Gong practitioners that had been jailed days earlier in nearby port city Tianjin. The government officials were confused, and the head guy was not there. The officials that were had, of course, heard of Falun Gong and had only known of Qigong as a form of gentle exercise for the elderly. How did the group move so many people so fast to show up for this demonstration? Even more troubling, the 5 leaders present for the negotiation, they represented very important institutions to the regime, and including Beijing University, the Army's Chief of Staff Department, and the Ministry of Supervision of Railway and Public Security, integral to the regime. After hours of negotiation, the government agreed to all of the group's conditions, including the release of Falun Gong prisoners. The crowd had won and the group dispersed. But that negotiated deal, well, it'd been made by the second most powerful official in China, the premier, Zhu Rongji, and had to be approved by General Secretary Jiang Zemin, who emphatically did not approve. Instead, he asked questions. Who was this group? How did they have so much support so fast? Only weeks later, he convened a meeting to track down members of Falun Gong and had government stand ready to wipe out the group. Jiang Zemin, since taking over after Tiananmen Square, had one underlying rule, and that was we do not negotiate with protesters. July 20th, only 88 days after the mysterious gathering, security forces across the country were dispatched to arrest Falun Gong members. Protests erupted across the country in response. Within 2 days, the government banned the practice of Falun Gong, and the war between Falun Gong and the Chinese Communist Party, it still rages on today. But how did this start? It was the 1980s, a time of huge change in China. Mao was dead. In his place, Deng Xiaoping, who had no taste or yen for repression and centralized control, was in power. He wanted to open up the country, to innovate, to soften government repression. And after a long hiatus, it was okay to practice a religion in China. Many old religions were resurrected, while new ones were created, but none rivaled the popularity of Qigong, a slow movement exercise that professed to connect the body with the spirit. Hand in hand with those newly granted religious freedoms were the loosening of rules around personal speech. In fact, for the first time in a long while, Chinese were able to openly criticize their government, behavior that under Mao might have resulted in re-education camps or imprisonment or worse. Then, spring of 1989, Tiananmen Square happened. Here's a quick rundown of that tragedy, since it's been over 35 years. From Britannica.com, quote, Tiananmen Square incident, series of protests and demonstrations in China in the spring of 1989 that culminated in the night of June 3rd to 4th with a government crackdown on the demonstrators in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Although the demonstrations and their subsequent repression occurred in cities throughout the country, the events in Beijing, especially in Tiananmen Square, historically linked to such other protests as the May 4th movement in 1919, came to symbolize the entire incident. By the spring of 1989, there was growing sentiment among university students and others in China for political and economic reform. The country had experienced a decade of remarkable economic growth and liberalization, and many Chinese had been exposed to foreign ideas and standards of living. In addition, although the economic advances in China had brought new prosperity to many citizens, it was accompanied by price inflation and opportunities for corruption by government officials. In the mid-1980s, the central government had encouraged some people, notably scientists and intellectuals, to assume a more active political role, but student-led demonstrations calling for more individual rights and freedoms in late 1986 and early 1987 caused hardliners in the government and Chinese Communist Party to suppress what they termed bourgeois liberalism. One casualty of this tougher stance was Hu Yaobang, who had been the CCP General Secretary since 1980 and who had encouraged democratic reforms. In January 1987, he was forced to resign his post. The catalyst for the chain of events in the spring of 1989 was the death of Hu in mid-April. Hu was transformed into a martyr for the cause of political liberalism. On the day of his funeral, April 22nd, tens of thousands of students gathered in Tiananmen Square, demanding democratic and other reforms. For the next several weeks, students in crowds of varying sizes, eventually joined by a wide variety of individuals seeking political, social, and economic reforms, gathered in the square. The initial government response was to issue stern warnings, but take no action against the mounting crowds in the square. Similar demonstrations rose up in a number of other Chinese cities. However, the principal outside media coverage was in Beijing, in part because a large number of Western journalists had gathered there to report on the visit to China by Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in mid-May. Shortly after his arrival, a demonstration in Tiananmen Square drew some 1 million participants and was widely broadcast overseas. Meanwhile, an intense debate ensued among government and party officials on how to handle the mounting protests. Moderates such as Zhao Ziyang, who was Hu Yaobang's successor as party general secretary, advocated negotiating with the demonstrators and offering concessions. However, they were overruled by hardliners led by Chinese Premier Li Peng and supported by paramount elder statesman Deng Xiaoping, who, fearing anarchy, insisted on forcibly suppressing the protests. During the last 2 weeks of May, martial law was declared in Beijing and army troops were stationed around the city. However, an attempt by the troops to reach Tiananmen Square was thwarted when Beijing citizens flooded the streets and blocked their way. Protesters remained in large numbers in Tiananmen Square, centering themselves around a plaster statue called Goddess of Democracy near the northern end of the square. Western journalists also maintained a presence there, often providing live coverage of those events. On the night of June 3rd to 4th, tanks and heavily armored troops advanced toward Tiananmen Square, opening fire on or crushing those who again tried to block their way. Once the soldiers reached the square, a number of the few thousand remaining demonstrators there chose to leave rather than face a continuation of that confrontation. By morning, the area had been cleared of protesters, though sporadic shootings occurred throughout the day. The military also forcibly moved in against protesters in several other Chinese cities. But in Shanghai, the mayor, Zhu Rongji, later to become the premier of China, was able to negotiate a peaceful settlement. By June 5th, the military had secured complete control, though during the day there was a notable, widely reported incident involving a lone protester who was subsequently dubbed Tank Man, facing down a column of tanks as it advanced on him near the square. The government's count of those killed was 241, including soldiers, with some 7,000 wounded. Most other estimates have put the death toll much higher. In the years since the incident, the government has generally attempted to suppress references to it. Public commemoration of the incident is officially banned. Back to Qigong and Falun Gong. That's when Xi Zemin came into power with his no more soft hearts for protesters policies, but with one major difference from Mao, that Zemin would and the CCP would distinguish between political groups and social gatherings or activities, which included Qigong. This meant the Chinese government did not take into account or turned a blind eye to the body-spirit connection of Qigong, because Zemin did clamp down on religions. Enter Falun Gong leader, the great master himself, Li Hongzhi. From his own account of himself, by 8 years old, he could levitate. He could make himself invisible and, quote, with the simple flick of a finger, he could draw long, rusty, and crooked nails out of pieces of wood, end quote. Even frozen pipes in winter were no match for Hongzhi. He need only tap them with his hand and voila. Quote, even he himself did not know how he did this, end quote. But other accounts say he was a trumpet player at a People's Liberation Army stud farm and also worked at a cereal and oil company. Yawn, right? In 1991, he left that cereal and oil business to practice Qigong, and he was a natural, apparently. Soon he was holding his own events, some seminars and workshops, which were wildly popular. On his early flyers, I noticed he called it, quote, my new art of Falun Dafa. You will love it, end quote. He registered with the Chinese government as an official master of Qigong, calling his organization the Falun Gong Research Society. Hongzhi went on to travel the world and was made an honorary citizen of Houston, Texas. At its peak, Falun Gong had 3 million practitioners in China, and in 1994, he published a guide to his teachings that was basically a religious text. The book contents promise the reader and practitioner of Falun Gong superpowers like eternal youth, flight, invisibility, and mind control, all with the caveat that you are not a different race or, God forbid, gay in their minds, because, oh my Lord, but that's what the text professes. It's garbage. I'm sorry I had to interject that. We know that. But it was in that book. It even goes on to say that heaven is racially segregated, which I'm thinking, if you actually put your brain on it, that is the definition of hell to me. Biracial children, according to this book, are called vehicles for aliens. What? In 1996, the Chinese media ran stories critical of Falun Gong. Damn, I never thought I'd side with the Chinese state media, but here I am, this slim instance. And get this, because the tactic may remind you of a semi-recent trend in the US, pay attention. The Falun Gong bombarded these stations with letters. Was this the world's inception of cancel culture? You be the judge. That letter writing campaign was not Hongzhi's idea, but Li saw what an impact it had. So guess what he did next? He added activism for the sake of Falun Gong to his religious requirements for spiritual elevation. That was the moment in history when Falun Gong was mandated to speak out against government officials that criticized Falun Gong. Fast forward to April 1999. There was a protest and the government arrested Falun Gong members. On April 25th, the place where I began this journey with you, members of Falun Gong flooded Beijing to demonstrate. So what happened next? Well, a huge trigger warning, because this next bit of history, it involves self-immolation. As a result of those demonstrations, Falun Gong in 1999 was officially banned by the Chinese government. Fast forward to January 23, 2001, 5 members of the Falun Gong cult poured gas on themselves and lit a match. All of them died. And how did the self-proclaimed master of Falun Gong react? He disowned the 5 members. He said either they were very bad followers or the government had staged this event. After that, many considered Hongzhi a liar, vicious, cold-hearted, and downright heartless. And that's when the government's campaign against Falun Gong really got going. This is the point when the government's anti-Falun Gong campaign went on steroids. They clamped down on religion in general, going so far as to mandate children in Chinese schools pledge allegiance to science. Next, the government rooted out members, re-education, labor camps, and allegedly killed over 3,000 members. Feeling the pressure from Chinese government, after 1999, Falun Gong pushed to go global. They bought a paper, the Epoch Times, that they used like the state media does in China to propagate their opinions and viewpoints. It is still under the control and ownership of the cult Falun Gong to this day. And then Li Hongzhi envisioned Shen Yun. Does that name sound familiar? I've no doubt you've seen television ads for Shen Yun. In Seattle and Denver, they tend to run a lot right around the first of the year, though it's usually in that Lunar New Year season. They show beautiful young dancers in elaborate, flowing, colorful costumes doing ballet performances. The latest ones, those from 2023 and 24, show audience members being interviewed as they are exiting the theater, and they're giving these glowing reviews of the dance performances. Well, Shen Yun was created by Falun Gong's master, Li Hongzhi. It's been reported by multiple sources that the actual dancers, They're volunteers, and as such, they do not receive a dime for their work. The organizers make money. Hongji makes money. I'd hoped to find out that the dancers have received payment, but so far my search has revealed quite the opposite. If you feel bad for having supported a cult with your dollars because you have attended in years past, well, you are in good company. I found this article from foundationswithjanet.org titled Shen Yun, Dance with a Cult Message Thrown In. And of course, links are in the show notes. The article reads, quote, "Have you ever wondered how cults are able to recruit followers? How do cults prosper and finance their message? What if you helped fund a cult accidentally? My friends and I did. It was supposed to be a fun girls' night out, but it became an interesting discussion on the methods of deception a cult can use to share their message and, quite frankly, fund a massive cult enterprise, and people could easily be led to give unknowingly. What is Shen Yun really? Shen Yun is a program of talented performers in colorful costumes in front of a huge media screen. The media ad campaign is extensive in each host city. The ads accurately reveal what a ticket buyer will see, but nothing of what they will hear. Those ads don't explain the reason Shen Yun tours the country. Shen Yun, at best, I can tell you, represents a new age cult of Buddhism. And I have to interject here. She's not quite right, but that's okay. Hours of research isn't for everyone. She continues, Shen Yun presents itself as a historical performance of Chinese dance that attracts people to buy tickets who then hear their message and support their cause. The problem is they don't truthfully explain their cause to the patrons until they are in their seats. Shen Yun is seen at reputable performing arts centers. What isn't explained is that the venue simply leases Shen Yun the space. The program is not part of the center's proposed calendar of performances. Why does this matter? Shen Yun isn't invited to perform by these venues. They simply rent the best places to give the appearance that they are just another performing arts group, but they are not. The venues are being placed in the difficult position of being sued for discrimination or receiving complaints from their patrons for allowing a cult to use their properties. So why should you care, she asks. Americans enjoy freedom of speech and freedom of religion. That freedom is provided for everyone, cults included. Christians who know their Bibles are probably not going to be swayed by a program like Shen Yun, but they also might not be aware that purchasing a ticket is funding a cult. The Falun Gong cult behind Shen Yun began in 1992 under the direction of a man named Li Hongji. Mr. Hongji was interviewed by Time and asked why his messages about the Falun Gong religion mattered. He answered that chaos reigned in our world today. Mr. Hongji said, quote, "The biggest cause of society's change today is that people no longer believe in orthodox religion. They go to church, but they no longer believe in God. They feel free to do anything. The second reason is that since the beginning of this century, aliens have begun to invade the human mind and its ideology and culture," end quote. Wait a minute, the author asks. Did this man just say aliens had invaded America? Yes, he did. How many of these people in this luxurious theater understood the message behind the dance performances of Shen Yun? And how many people sitting in the beautiful performance halls around the country understood the money that they spent on tickets would be used to fund Mr. Hongji's cult? According to an Insider magazine article, Shen Yun made about $22.5 million in 1 year, and their expenses were $7.3 million. The magazine said that the Shen Yun organization had about $75 million in total assets. A lot of people are funding this cult. That's why I thought it was important to speak up. A columnist from the New Yorker wrote an article about her experience with Shen Yun. And actually, I've linked that article in the show notes. And I have some quotes later on about what she wrote. She had always heard about the group, which is based in New York, but had never attended a performance. She went home to Houston and her dad suggested it as a fun outing. So they went and she, like my group, was amazed to see what was presented to the crowd. She described one solo saying a man came on stage to sing a song in Chinese, which was translated on the screen behind him as, "We follow Dafa, the great way." He began singing about a creator who saved mankind and made the world anew. "Atheism and evolution are deadly ideas," he sang. "Modern trends destroy what makes us human." At the event, the writer of this blog post saw performances titled "The Novice Monks, Mortal Fate, Abetting the Wicked, Persecuted for Your Redemption, Taoist Destiny," and Li Bal and his angelic encounter. And she went on. The program concluded with a deeply disturbing performance titled "Renewal of Heaven and Earth." She said she wrote the blog because she believes everyone should shun Shen Yun, otherwise we are promoting a cult. She goes on to write, "My friends and I snuck out a little early and we were met by an attractive woman who asked if she could talk to us a little more about the performance. My friend explained that we were Christians and didn't agree with the messages. The woman bowed slightly to us and went in search of someone else." She concludes her blog post with this: "There have always been cults and there always will be. Our mission is to recognize a cult and make others aware." I wanted to read that New Yorker article for myself, and here are a few well-written highlights. Shen Yun has lived in the pink, fluffy insulation of my mind for a while now. Last year, the ads were goldenrod yellow, like dehydrated urine, and they said, "Reviving 5,000 years of civilization." The year before that, the ads, "Experience a divine culture," were green. The year before that, the Shen Yun poster featured two women dancing, wearing birthday cake frosting colors, and for months I sat in the subway reading but in no way processing the phrase "absolutely the #1 show in the world." These posters were so uncanny and contentless that the easiest explanation for their existence was that my brain had simply glitched and invented Shen Yun the way John Nash invented his roommate in A Beautiful Mind. Shen Yun was a Baader-Meinhof object. Once I saw it, I started to see it everywhere. Shen Yun greeted me silently at the bus stop and loomed over highway exits, following me around in the physical plane of existence the way anything you shop for on the internet starts to follow you around online. Then over the holidays, I went home to Houston, where my parents live. On Christmas Day, my dad told me that he had something special planned for the family. "It's this show," he said. "It's supposed to be spectacular. It's called Shen Yun." "What?" I said. "Mike and Lily saw it," my dad said. "They said it was beautiful." "It's real," I said. "What is it?" "Oh," my dad said, "it's dancing, beautiful dancing, really fabulous traditional dancing." "Is it like Cirque du Soleil?" I asked, furiously Googling Shen Yun on my phone, something that had never occurred to me to do before. Why look up a figment of your own imagination? I was seeing a lot of search results that involved the word cult. I clicked on one link and then closed it, realizing that I did not want to spoil what lay ahead of me, a free journey into the fantastic unknown. On the day of Shen Yun, I developed chills and a fever, which I immediately decided to ignore in the interest of seeing Shen Yun. My family drove to the fancy concert hall downtown, where the lobby was full of people in suits and cocktail dresses. After we took our seats, two hosts with animatronic smiles, speaking both Chinese and English, began introducing a series of dances, which were called things like "Goodness in the Face of Evil" and "The World Divinely Restored." The female dancers moved in hypnotic swirls. The male dancers jumped and flipped. Behind the stage was an enormous screen upon which digital backdrops, ancient temples, royal gardens, the cosmos appeared, along with digital dancers who would walk to the bottom of the screen and then pop out via the appearance of a living dancer. on the stage. The colors were near neon and unnatural. They reminded me of the glowing hues of Photo Hunt, the tabletop bar game. The host started talking about a spiritual discipline called Falun Dafa, and they introduced a dance in which a beautiful young follower of Falun Dafa was kidnapped and imprisoned by communists who harvested her organs. I'm hallucinating, I whispered to my brother in the dark. Would everyone like to learn a little Chinese? One of the hosts asked. He intoned a phrase and asked the audience to repeat it. That phrase means I love Shen Yun, he said. I felt my forehead. The dances continued, sleeves swirling, skirts rippling. A man came on stage to sing a song in Chinese, which was translated on the screen behind him. In the final dance number, a group of Falun Dafa followers who wore blue and yellow and clutched books of religious teachings battled for space in a public square with corrupt youth. Their corruption was evident because they were wearing black, looking at their cell phones, and in the case of two men, holding hands. Chairman Mao appeared and the sky turned black. The city in the digital backdrop was obliterated by an earthquake, then finished off by a communist tsunami. A red hammer and sickle glowed in the center of the wave. Dazed, I rubbed my eyes and saw a huge bearded face disappearing in the water. Was that? I said to my brother, wondering if I needed to go to the hospital. Karl Marx, he said. Yeah, I think that was a tsunami with the face of Karl Marx. The writer of the article, Gia Tolentino of The New Yorker, gives us some helpful background on Shen Yun. The Shen Yun Performing Arts Organization was founded in 2006 in New York's Hudson Valley and put on its first touring show in 2007. By 2009, there were 3 touring Shen Yun companies. To date, there are 6, each consisting of 40 or so dancers, all of them trained at the Fei Tan Academy, which is situated on a 427-acre campus established for Falun Dafa practitioners in upstate New York. The dancers are accompanied by an orchestra that incorporates Chinese instruments. Each troupe includes about 80 people. In addition to the 96 American cities it is touring this year, Shen Yun will visit Vancouver, Berlin, Auckland, Taipei, and dozens of other places, she says. She goes on to write about their ad blitzes and how the Shen Yun ad season has, in fact, become a meme. And that's not a compliment. She writes, quote, the real root of Shen Yun's meme-friendly eeriness is that the ads brightly and aggressively broadcast nothing at all. That is why it's so easy to imagine them popping up in Ebbing, Missouri, or in the extended Blade Run universe, or on Mars. The ads have to be both ubiquitous and devoid of content so that they can convince more than 1 million people to pay good money to watch what is essentially religious political propaganda, or more generously, an extremely elaborate commercial for Falun Dafa's spiritual teachings and its plight vis-a-vis the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, she notes that the CCP warns us against this group, and I guess they want us instead to consume their own CCP propaganda. I thought it was the pot calling the kettle black. I asked Google after reading these articles, who profits from Shen Yun performances, and received this response. Who profits from Shen Yun? After expenses are covered through ticket sales, proceeds go to Shen Yun. The finances of Shen Yun and Falun Gong appear to be linked, with technically separate corporations sharing funds, executives, and the same mission. Li Hongji describes the Shen Yun performance as a means of saving audiences, end quote. I asked, do the Shen Yun dancers get paid? And here was the response. Dancers are trained at the Fei Tan Academy of the Arts, which is part of a 427-acre refuge for Falun Gong adherents in upstate New York. Profits from Shen Yun shows go towards maintaining the academy. The dance companies also, unusually, have a mixture of paid and unpaid performers, according to Hazlitt. And I was asking after I typed that in to myself, what the heck? Basically, they're saying most aren't paid. I couldn't help it, and I dug deeper. What is Falun Gong scandal? Here's the response. There are reports of systemic torture, illegal imprisonment, forced labor, organ harvesting, and abusive psychiatric measures with the apparent aim of forcing practitioners to recant their belief in Falun Gong. And they're talking about that China is doing this in China right now. I have to add a YouTube clip here, which I thought was both cheeky, but also it felt on point. So here it goes.
No, the show does look really cool. If you're into dancing stunts and bright colors, you'll probably really like it. As long as you're not epileptic and can look past the blatant propaganda, anti-feminism, homophobia, anti-evolution, and all the rest. Is it a cult?
So the aim of Shen Yun is to tell the story of how the CCP destroyed Chinese culture and, of course, Falun Gong. It sounds plausible, right? Except the roots are hidden. The Falun Gong have a hidden agenda, and they cloak extreme and intolerant viewpoints, manipulating the public at the very least. Li Hongzhi has made it a battle between good and evil, and if a member, it is mandatory to participate in that battle. The religion, their three tenets are compassion, forbearance, and truthfulness. It preaches that you need Li to implant a spinning wheel inside of you to achieve spiritual, moral, and bodily perfection. Li instructs his followers to lie about Falun Gong. Li says followers are not to use science and medicine. At this point, I have to share the story of Colleen May from Australia. After meditation in a park with this group, she continued to spend more time with the people of Falun Gong. That led her to stop taking her high blood pressure medication. When that resulted in Colleen being hospitalized, she spit out the pills in the hospital and pulled her IV out of her arm. Colleen died. Her daughter knows that if she'd never met the Falun Gong, her mother would have taken her medicine and be alive today. In fact, she jokes that her mother would outlive her. It's heartbreaking. After Colleen's death, a Falun Gong spokesperson said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if she'd only believed in Falun Gong more, been a better follower, she would still be alive. There's another story you have to know. The leader of Falun Gong, Li Hongzhi, has been using all of his tax-free money to build a mega complex in Deer Park, New York. But he hasn't been hiring contractors. No, it's been members that have been doing all the construction, volunteers, which I have to assume, like the dancers of Shenyang, means they are not paid. One worker at the 400-plus acre estate called Dragon Springs died while doing construction. OSHA refused to investigate, saying the worker was a volunteer, not an employee, so there would be no investigation or ramifications for the fatal accident. It's shocking to me how the cult and Li Hongzhi in particular are doing to its members what they claim the CCP did to them, which is abusing people on a quest for control. What a damn tragedy. Falun Gong has a huge no-go compound in Deer Park, New York. They enjoy nonprofit status, a totally tax-free enterprise. It may be hurting people's health by dissuading them from visiting a doctor or taking preventative medicines. It's a reminder to all of us to keep our eyes open, to keep our common sense engaged. And if something gives us the heebie-jeebies, well, listen to that. Thanks for listening to Curious Cat. Hang on after the music for another segment of the Curious Q. Until next week, stay curious and skeptical. I love you. It's time for the Curious Q, a quick rundown of the week's weirdest headlines. The first story was literally ripped from my daily Ghost Stories calendar and has to be one of the most devious war acts I've read about recently. Titled Operation Wandering Soul, During the Vietnam War, the American military tried numerous tactics to break the spirit of the Viet Cong guerrillas. One of its most out there plans drew on Buddhist traditions about the afterlife, specifically the belief that if the dead were not buried in their homeland, their soul would wander forever in agony. Conceived by the U.S. Army's 6th Psychological Operations Battalion, Operation Wandering Soul used helicopter-mounted speakers to blast horrifying messages, supposedly from a dead Viet Cong soldier who pleaded with his comrades in arms to stop fighting before they became lost and wandering souls like him. The recordings were accompanied by blood-chilling sound effects meant to further undermine Viet Cong morale. The audio for one of these recordings, known as Ghost Tape Number 10, is available online. Give it a listen. Unless you mind getting nightmares, then absolutely do not listen. From 1930s Alaska and coast to coast, a photo of a small alien entity is said to have been taken in the 1930s and was recently AI enhanced by UFO researcher and analyst Scott Waring. According to the person who sent the original image to Waring, his grandfather saw the entity, estimated to be about 3 feet tall, in a remote area of Alaska and chased after it until he was close enough to capture an image. Waring used AI to enhance the original image and has conjectured that the eerie white color of the alien could have been a type of containment suit it was wearing. Further, it may have had a kind of blurring technology to evade scrutiny. What's your take on this curious find? Share your thoughts with Coast to Coast on their Facebook page. The final story comes from Mysterious Universe and writer Brian Swanser. His article titled Strange Cases of the Cursed Movie Roles is worth a read. I've got the links in the show notes. He writes, quote, Hollywood is dense with stories of the paranormal and the unexplained. And one area that seems to be pervasive is the idea that some movie roles have taken some sort of curse surrounding them. According to the lore, those who have taken those roles are doomed to misfortune, injury, or worse. And here we will look at some notable examples of these supposedly cursed roles. One of the most well-known such movie curses in pop culture orbits the DC Comics character of Superman. Insidious and seemingly insatiable, it is a curse that sucks in and entangles anyone who has anything to do with Superman, and which has come to be known as the Superman curse. The supposed Superman curse can be traced back to the character's inception and creation by comic book artists Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. It has sometimes been noted that they are perhaps the first to suffer the wrath of the curse, as their character only started getting popular and making real money after they had sold the rights to the precursor company to the DC Comics for a paltry $130. Siegel and Shuster would go on to try to claim some legal rights to ownership and royalties, but were unable to ever get anywhere with that. In the end, they would barely ever see a dime from their iconic creation, and Siegel would at one point lament, I can't stand to look at Superman comic books. It makes me physically ill. I love Superman, yet he has become an alien thing to me. In later years, they would both fall on hard financial times, with Shuster also suffering from a myriad of medical problems, including waning eyesight that prevented him from drawing and making a living. And although they were finally granted a byline in Superman materials, they were paid a pittance and lived in near poverty for their entire lives. It leaves one asking whether this was part of a curse or was just bad luck and a poor business decision. But if there is a curse, it can probably be traced back here to the beginning. Whether this particular curse started with Siegel and Shuster or not, it certainly didn't end with them. In many of the cases, those supposedly affected were actors associated in some way to the series on television, animation, and film. In the 1940s, Superman made his first appearance on television in the form of a series of 2 low-budget black and white serials starring actor Kirk Allen as the Man of Steel. Far from a career boom for him, the role conversely destroyed it. When the series ended, Allen found himself nearly jobless, unable to snag any roles other than bit parts and commercial voiceovers, simply because he was so associated with Superman and irredeemably typecast. And no one really even knew his name because, as an unknown actor, his name hadn't even been in the credits on the serials he had appeared in. In later years, his mind would wither away due to the onslaught of Alzheimer's disease, and he would die in 1999 in obscurity, never having landed another famous role, and claiming later in his life that Superman had ruined his life. The curse then supposedly reared its head again when the first Superman animated series aired from 1941 to 43 with the character voiced by Bud Collyer. While nothing bad happened to him at the time, and indeed he went on to become rather successful as the host of the game show To Tell the Truth, things took a turn for the worse later in his life. In '66, a new Superman animated series titled The New Adventures of Superman was launched, and Collyer was asked to reprise his iconic role, which he did to much fanfare. Just a few years after taking the gig, he would suddenly fall ill with a severe and unexpected circulatory ailment, which made quick work of him to kill him at the age of 61. While this is all certainly spooky in a sense, it still wasn't really considered a curse yet and wouldn't gain that particular distinction and launch itself into the public consciousness until actor George Reeves took up the red cape for the '51 film Superman and the Mole Men, as well as for the Superman TV series that ran from 1952 to 1958. Although he had a long film career before his role as the Man of Steel, his career would take a nosedive after his appearance in the film and series, as he was irredeemably typecast, similar to Kirk Allen. He would find fewer and fewer roles that did not have to do with Superman, and even when he did appear in films, people could just not separate him from the iconic character he had played. He would spiral into a deep depression and was the first to voice the idea that he had been literally cursed by the Superman role. And on June 16, 1959, just a day before his own wedding, he was found dead in his home by a apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, while his girlfriend and friends had a party downstairs. Although officially considered a suicide, considering Reeves's fingerprints were not found on the gun, it has long generated rumors and conspiracy theories that foul play was involved. It was Reeves' death and his ominous mention of curses in the days before that would truly bring the idea of a Superman curse to life. And this was when the public began speculating that there might be something to it all. This would only be bolstered by the next high-profile victim of the curse. Perhaps the highest profile victim of the alleged curse is the man who most people probably see as the quintessential Superman. Yes, Christopher Reeve. He appeared in many Superman movies. Reeve would truly embody the popular superhero to the point that his image was inextricably linked to Superman, and this might be why he would draw the most attention to the malicious curse. There was, of course, the typical typecasting involved. Indeed, he found little memorable work outside of that role that had made him famous. He was mostly relegated to bit roles or those that had something to do with Superman afterward, but he managed to keep his career afloat, and this would be the least of his worries as the curse began its dark work. On the side, Reeve was an avid horseback rider, often participating in equestrian events. But on May 27, 1995, one of those events would go tragically wrong when the actor was thrown from his horse to break his neck and leave him paralyzed from the neck down. Oddly, the grievous injury was blamed on witness accounts that his hands had rather freakishly gotten hopelessly tangled in the reins, forcing his head to take the brunt of the impact. Reeve would never walk again, and he became a major advocate of treatment and support for those suffering paralysis. Yet his life was tragically cut short at the age of 52 when he died on October 10, 2004. Rather eerily, his wife Dana Reeve would develop lung cancer shortly after this and die 2 years later at the age of 44. Rather ominously, it seems that the supposed curse seemed to have targeted the 1978 Superman movie, as Reeve was not the only alleged victim of the doomed production by a long shot, with various actors appearing in the movie experiencing death and misfortune during and after production. Margot Kidder, who played Superman's love interest Lois Lane, famously had all manner of woes in her life following Superman. Her career would take a deep plummet, her bipolar disorder became worse, and a car accident in 1990 left her partially paralyzed and unable to find work. She turned to drugs and alcohol and in 96 had a major mental breakdown, vanishing for several days only to turn up in a delusional state, chopping her hair off and ranting about how her husband was out to kill her. Kidder's life would further unravel and spin out of control until her death on May 13th, 2018 of an alcohol and drug overdose. I encourage you to read his very long, elaborate article. And he goes on to talk about the Joker, the curse of the Joker. And we all know about Heath Ledger, who played the Joker, and his tragic death as well. I will make this note. He says, quote, interestingly, Ledger's was not the only death or injury to haunt that production, as a special effects technician named Conway Wycliffe was killed during a stunt for a scene involving a chase with a truck, and later a stunt double would be injured under similar circumstances, and Morgan Freeman would also be involved in a serious car accident in 2008, after which Freeman and his wife would divorce not long after that. By far the spookiest and most terrifying incident related to the Batman curse happened in 2012 when a 24-year-old PhD student at the University of Colorado, Denver, James Holmes, attended a screening of The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado, and proceeded to set off a tear gas canister before indiscriminately opening fire upon the crowd of theater goers. When the smoke cleared, 12 were dead and a further 70 were injured. The Nolan Batman movies have been critically and commercially well received, but certainly have their demons stalking about in the shadows. There's even more recent tragedy involved with the Joker character, including Jared Leto, who played in The Suicide Squad. And I encourage you to read the article because it's just tragic. It's heartbreaking. He closes his article by saying it's hard to say whether all of this is attributable to any sort of supernatural curse. Movie productions employ so many people and there are bound to be deaths, misfortunes, and accidents orbiting them from time to time. And with so many involved, there is no greater rate of mishaps than there really would be with a random sampling of people. Add in talk of a curse and suddenly anything bad that happens can be blamed on it. So perhaps this is just reading into things a little too much and weaving an urban legend around nothing more than bad luck. Or is it perhaps something more? I leave it for you to decide. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Q. We hit number 1 on Good Pods for supernatural and meditation podcast this week. Woo-hoo! That's all thanks to you. If you've got a story to share, a first-hand weird account, or supernatural news story you'd like me to cover, email me at curious_cat_podcast@icloud.com. Stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.